a WikiVidi documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. United States Senate. The United States Senate is the upper chamber of the United States Congress, which along with the United States House of Representatives, the lower chamber, comprises the legislature of the United States. The composition and powers of the Senate are established by Article 1 of the United States Constitution. The Senate is composed of senators, each of whom represents a single state in its entirety, with each state being equally represented by 2 senators, regardless of its population, serving staggered terms of 6 years. With 50 states currently in the Union, there are 100 U.S. senators. From 1789 until 1913, senators were appointed by legislatures of the states they represented. Following the ratification of the 17th Amendment in 1913, they are now popularly elected. The Senate chamber is located in the north wing of the Capitol, in Washington, D.C. As the upper house, the Senate has several powers of advice and consent which are unique to it. These include the approval of treaties and the confirmation of cabinet secretaries, Supreme Court justices, federal judges, other federal executive officials, flag officers, regulatory officials, ambassadors, and other federal uniformed officers. In addition to these, in cases wherein no candidate receives a majority of electors for vice president, the duty falls to the Senate to elect one of the top 2 recipients of electors for that office. It further has the responsibility of conducting trials of those impeached by the House. The Senate is widely considered both a more deliberative and more prestigious body than the House of Representatives due to its longer terms, smaller size, and statewide constituencies, which historically led to a more collegial and less partisan atmosphere. The presiding officer of the Senate is the Vice President of the United States, who is President of the Senate. In the Vice President's absence, the President pro tempore, who is customarily the senior member of the party holding a majority of seats, presides over the Senate. In the early 20th century, the practice of majority and minority parties electing their floor leaders began, although they are not constitutional officers. History. The creators of the Constitution created a bicameral Congress primarily as a compromise between those who felt that each state, since it was sovereign, should be equally represented, and those who felt the legislature must directly represent the people, as the House of Commons did in the United Kingdom. This idea of having one chamber represent people equally, while the other gives equal representation to states regardless of population, was known as the Connecticut Compromise. There was also a desire to have 2 houses that could act as an internal check on each other. One was intended to be a People's House, directly elected by the people, and with short terms obliging the representatives to remain close to their constituents. The other was intended to represent the states to such extent as they retained their sovereignty except for the powers expressly delegated to the national government. The Senate was thus not designed to serve the people of the United States equally. The Constitution provides that the approval of both chambers is necessary for the passage of legislation. First convened in 1789, the Senate of the United States was formed on the example of the ancient Roman Senate. The name is derived from the Senatus, Latin for Council of Elders. James Madison made the following comment about the Senate. The Constitution stipulates that no constitutional amendment may be created to deprive a state of its equal suffrage in the Senate without that state's consent. The District of Columbia and all other territories are not entitled to representation allowed to vote in either house of the Congress. The District of Columbia elects 2 shadow U.S. senators, but they are officials of the D.C. city government and not members of the U.S. Senate. The United States has had 50 states since 1959, thus the Senate has had 100 senators since 1959. The disparity between the most and least populous states has grown since the Connecticut Compromise, which granted each state 2 members of the Senate and at least 1 member of the House of Representatives, for a total minimum of 3 presidential electors, regardless of population. In 1787, Virginia had roughly 10 times the population of Rhode Island, whereas today California has roughly 70 times the population of Wyoming. Based on the 1790 and 2000 censuses, this means some citizens are effectively 2 orders of magnitude better represented in the Senate than those in other states. Seats in the House of Representatives are approximately proportionate to the population of each state, reducing the disparity of representation. Before the adoption of the 17th Amendment in 1913, senators were elected by the individual state legislatures. Problems with repeated vacant seats due to the inability of a legislature to elect senators, intrastate political struggles, and even bribery and intimidation had gradually led to a growing movement to amend the Constitution to allow for the direct election of senators. Qualifications. Article I, Section 3, of the Constitution, sets 3 qualifications for senators. They must be at least 30 years old. They must have been citizens of the United States for the past 9 years or longer. And they must be inhabitants of the states they seek to represent at the time of their election. The age and citizenship qualifications for senators are more stringent than those for representatives. In Federalist No. 62, James Madison justified this arrangement by arguing that the senatorial trust called for a greater extent of information and stability of character. The Senate is the sole judge of a senator's qualifications. During its early years, however, the Senate did not closely scrutinize the qualifications of its members. As a result, 3 senators who failed to meet the age requirement were nevertheless admitted to the Senate: Henry Clay, Armistead Thompson Mason, and John Eaton. Such an occurrence, however, has not been repeated since. In 1934, Rushdie Holt Sr. was elected to the Senate at the age of 29. He waited until he turned 30 to take the oath of office. In November 1972, Joe Biden was elected to the Senate at the age of 29. But he reached his 30th birthday before the swearing-in ceremony for incoming senators in January 1973. The 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution disqualifies from the Senate any federal or state officers who had taken the requisite oath to support the Constitution, but later engaged in rebellion or aided the enemies of the United States. This provision, which came into force soon after the end of the Civil War, was intended to prevent those who had sided with the Confederacy from serving. That amendment, however, also provides a method to remove that disqualification: a 2/3 vote of both chambers of Congress. Elections and term. Originally, senators were selected by the state legislatures, not by popular elections. By the early years of the 20th century, the legislatures of as many as 29 states had provided for popular election of senators by referendums. Popular election to the Senate was standardized nationally in 1913 by the ratification of the 17th Amendment. Term. Senators serve terms of 6 years each. The terms are staggered so that approximately 1/3 of the seats are up for election every 2 years. This was achieved by dividing the senators of the first Congress into thirds, where the terms of 1/3 expired after 2 years, the terms of another third expired after 4, and the terms of the last third expired after 6 years. This arrangement was also followed after the admission of new states into the Union. The staggering of terms has been arranged such that both seats from a given state are not contested in the same general election, except when a mid-term vacancy is being filled. Current senators whose 6-year terms are set to expire on January 3, 2019, belong to Class I. There is no constitutional limit to the number of terms a senator may serve. The Constitution set the date for Congress to convene. Article 1, Section 4, Clause 2, originally set the date for the 3rd day of December. The 20th Amendment, however, changed the opening date for sessions to noon on the 3rd day of January, unless they shall by law appoint a different day. The 20th Amendment also states that Congress shall assemble at least once in every year, and allows Congress to determine its convening and adjournment dates, and other dates and schedules as it desires. Article 1, Section 3, provides that the President has the power to convene Congress on extraordinary occasions at his discretion. A member who has been elected, but not yet seated, is called a senator-elect. A member who has been appointed to a seat, but not yet seated, is called a senator-designate. Elections. Elections to the Senate are held on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November in even-numbered years, Election Day, and coincide with elections for the House of Representatives. Senators are elected by their state as a whole. The Elections Clause of the United States Constitution grants each state the power to legislate a method by which senators are elected. Ballot access rules for independent and minor party candidates also vary from state to state. In 45 states, a primary election is held first for the Republican and Democratic parties, with the general election following a few months later. In most of these states, the nominee may receive only a plurality, while in some states, a runoff is required if no majority was achieved. In the general election, the winner is the candidate who receives a plurality of the popular vote. However, in 5 states, different methods are used. In Georgia, a runoff between the top 2 candidates occurs if the plurality winner in the general election does not also win a majority. In Washington, California, and Louisiana, a nonpartisan blanket primary is held in which all candidates participate in a single primary regardless of party affiliation, and the top 2 candidates in terms of votes received at the primary election advance to the general election, where the winner is the candidate with the greater number of votes. In Louisiana, the blanket primary is considered the general election, and the winner of the blanket primary can win the overall election if he or she received a majority of the vote, skipping the runoff. This can lead to a potential situation in those 3 states in which both candidates advancing are affiliated with the same party and the seat is considered won by that party even though a winner has not been determined yet. Overall, in Maine, following 2 ballot initiatives in 2016 and 2018, respectively, to establish and maintain instant runoff voting, known in that state as ranked choice voting, the state uses IRV to nominate and elect candidates for federal offices, including the Senate. Midterm vacancies. The 17th Amendment requires that midterm vacancies in the Senate be filled by special election, whenever a senator must be appointed or elected. The Secretary of the Senate mails one of 3 forms to the state's governor to inform them of the proper wording to certify the appointment of a new senator. If a special election for one seat happens to coincide with a general election for the state's other seat, each seat is contested separately. A senator elected in a special election takes office as soon as possible after the election and serves until the original 6-year term expires. The 17th Amendment requires that midterm vacancies in the Senate be filled by special election, but permits state legislatures to empower their governors to make temporary appointments until the required special election takes place. Temporary appointees are permitted to run in the special election in their own right. The manner by which the 17th Amendment is enacted varies among the states. A 2018 report breaks this down into the following 3 broad categories. In 6 states within the final category above Arizona, Hawaii, Maryland, North Carolina, Utah, and Wyoming, the governor must appoint someone of the same political party as the previous incumbent. In September 2009, Massachusetts changed its law to enable the governor to appoint a temporary replacement for the late Senator Edward Kennedy until the special election in January 2010. In 2004, Alaska enacted legislation and a separate ballot referendum that took effect on the same day, but that conflicted with each other. The effect of the ballot-approved law is to withhold from the governor authority to appoint a senator. Because the 17th Amendment vests the power to grant that authority to the legislature, not the people, or the state generally, it is unclear whether the ballot measure supplants the legislature's statute granting that authority. As a result, it is uncertain whether an Alaska governor may appoint an interim senator to serve until a special election is held to fill the vacancy. Salary and benefits. The annual salary of each senator, since 2009, is $174,000. The president pro tempore and party leaders receive $193,400. In June 2003, at least 40 of the then senators were millionaires. In 2018, over 50 senators were millionaires. Along with earning salaries, senators receive retirement and health benefits that are identical to other federal employees and are fully vested after 5 years of service. Senators are covered by the Federal Employees Retirement System or Civil Service Retirement System. FERS has been the Senate's retirement system since January 1, 1987. While CSRS applies only for those senators who were in the Senate from December 31, 1986, and prior. As it is for federal employees, congressional retirement is funded through taxes and the participants' contributions. Under FERS, senators contribute 1.3% of their salary into the FERS retirement plan and pay 6.2% of their salary in Social Security taxes. The amount of a senator's pension depends on the years of service and the average of the highest 3 years of their salary. The starting amount of a senator's retirement annuity may not exceed 80% of their final salary. In 2006, the average annual pension for retired senators and representatives under CSRS was $60,972, while those who retired under FERS, or in combination with CSRS, was $35,952. Senators are regarded as more prominent political figures than members of the House of Representatives, because there are fewer of them, and because they serve for longer terms, usually represent larger constituencies, sit on more committees, and have more staffers. Far more senators have been nominees for the presidency than representatives. Furthermore, 3 senators have been elected president while serving in the Senate, while only 1 representative has been elected president while serving in the House, though Garfield was also a senator-designate at the time of his election to the presidency, having been chosen by the Ohio legislature to fill a Senate vacancy. Seniority. According to the Convention of Senate Seniority, the senator with the longer tenure in each state is known as the senior senator. The other is the junior senator. This convention does not have official significance, though seniority generally is a factor in the selection of physical offices. In the 115th Congress, the most senior, junior senator, is Maria Cantwell of Washington, who was sworn in on January 3, 2001, and is currently 20th in seniority, behind Patty Murray, who was sworn in on January 3, 1993, and is currently 7th in seniority. The most junior, senior senator, is Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, who was sworn in January 3, 2015, and is currently 79th in seniority, ahead of Senator John Neely Kennedy, who was sworn in January 3, 2017, and is currently 95th in seniority. Expulsion and other disciplinary actions. The Senate may expel a senator by a 2/3 vote. 15 senators have been expelled in the Senate's history: William Blount, for treason, in 1797, and 14 in 1861 and 1862 for supporting the Confederate secession. Although no senator has been expelled since 1862, many senators have chosen to resign when faced with expulsion proceedings. For example, Bob Packwood in 1995. The Senate has also censured and condemned senators. Censure requires only a simple majority and does not remove a senator from office. Some senators have opted to withdraw from their re-election races rather than face certain censure or expulsion, such as Robert Horricelli in 2002. Brought to you by WikiVidi documentaries. Would you like to know more?